Hello, this is Angelica Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Blessed Vernal Equinox, friends. It's Angelica Yingst, and today we're diving into the history, symbolism, and spiritual meaning of Ostara, that's what modern pagans call Vernal Equinox. And before I fully nerd out, because I will, quick disclaimer. Okay, religion is one of my special interests, and I know that, as someone who is neurodivergent, that can be a little confusing, which just means I love it. I love the history, I love the symbolism, I love the patterns across cultures. I think about it all the time. If you give me an opening, I will tell you the history of something. So in this episode, I'm going to reference Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, a few other traditions along the way. I am Episcopalian. I was raised Catholic. I'm philosophically Buddhist and very much an earth-honoring, tree-hugging witch. And I'm not speaking from within all the traditions that I talk about. I'm speaking as someone who studies them. I do have a degree in religion, but, I just like to go down rabbit holes now that I'm a grown-up. And, I just have to say there's kind of a distinction we often make. So theologians ask what God thinks about humans, and religious study scholars ask what humans think about God. And I'm definitely in the latter. So if I start sounding like I belong to whatever tradition I'm talking about, I promise I'm not converting mid-episode. I am just enthusiastic. So I do tend to hold a pluralistic view that many paths are reaching towards the same truth or similar truths. And I know that doesn't land for everyone, and that can be offensive to people, but I just want to name that up front so you know. Okay, so let's start with some background. I want to talk about the Wheel of the Year, and I probably talk about this every episode, but that I talk about, one of the points on the Wheel of the Year, but part of my own personal spiritual practice is honoring these 8 seasonal turning points, what modern pagans call sabbats. So historically speaking, there isn't like one ancient culture that practiced all 8 of the Wiccan sabbats exactly as we do today. The Wheel of the Year as a full system was really codified in the 1950s by Gerald Gardner, who's the founder of Wicca. Did you guys know that Wicca is, as old as my father and my mother, my mother was born 1950. But yeah, it's only been around since the 1950s, but it has this like aura of ancientness, right? Because it pulled from traditional, what we call pagan belief systems, so what like the folk religions were practicing, the religions of the land, the religions of the people before Christianity. And so Gerald Gardner got together with Ross Nichols, who's the founder of the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and they essentially wove together seasonal festivals into a unified calendar. Basically like a lectionary, like you would have in a Christian church, that basically is like a year of holy days, what they call sabbats and espats. So espats are the lunar cycles, so they're the rituals that are performed at the full moon, and the sabbats are 8 points on the Wheel of the Year. They're the equinoxes, solstices, and then every the in-between times are also, they call them the cross-quarter holidays. They're Earth celebrations, solar celebrations, and then the espats are the lunar celebrations. So a quick side note, because Sabbat always trips me up. So sometimes I see that word and I pronounce it Shabbat. Shabbat is Jewish. That's basically, the day from sundown, like sundown on Friday to sundown on Saturday is the holy day for Judaism. So that's called the Shabbat. Okay, the Sabbath is Sunday. That's the Christian holy day. A Sabbat is pagan. Okay, so I will try. I still mess up. It's a whole thing. I look at that word S-A-B-B-A-T and I say Shabbat, or I say Sabbath, or I say Sabbath, or whatever. I really look at that word and I get tripped up. I don't know why. Maybe it's like a speech impediment for it. But anyway, I don't know. Within the Wheel of the Year, we have what are called lesser sabbats. Those are the equinoxes and solstices. Those are called the solar sabbats. And then the greater sabbats are the cross-quarter days, and they're tied to agricultural and seasonal life cycles. And those are called the earth sabbats, or the earth holidays, So together they kind of create this rhythm about every 6 weeks where we pause, check in, and realign. And we are aligned to the earth cycles, the sun cycles. And so people often ask me, Angie, why do you follow the Wheel of the Year if you don't consider yourself Wiccan? And the answer is simple, because it brings me back to the earth. I think of the Wheel of the Year as being an agrarian calendar, meaning it's aligned with harvests and the cycles of the plants, the cycles of the earth. And so what really it does, when we align with cycles like the cycle of the sun, the cycle of the moon, the seasons, we're actually aligning our inner world with something ancient, something real, something that is part of the earth. And I always feel like we are so disconnected. I mean, the fact that we can go into a supermarket and buy apples all year is, when I was a kid, you couldn't really do that. They had what was in season in the Northern Hemisphere. Maybe it was, I could buy oranges, here and there, but it was like still, it was too, it was still tied to the seasons that we were in. So when we're eating oranges all year, and we live in, I live in a place where oranges don't grow. There are eating systems that are like, you shouldn't eat oranges if your people are not from a place where oranges would grow, because our bodies aren't developed enough to eat those things, right? But anyway, I am wandering off my path. So, we can honestly forget that we're part of nature. And I think going back to an agrarian calendar to think about what would we do at this time of year, so, in spring, obviously we're planting seeds. So we're outside a lot. We're getting the soil ready. We're thinking about what we want to be planting and taking care of and nourishing, and really nurturing so it can grow for us. So because we live indoors and we watch seasons through the screens, we experience nature kind of secondhand, but we're still animals on this earth. And for me, honoring these turning points is a way of dissolving what my teacher once called the myth of separation, the illusion that we are somehow separate from the natural world. We're not. We're part of the same cycle. We are predators in our, local community, right? And Ostara is one of those moments where it becomes very, very clear. And so it's kind of why I want to talk about the Wheel of the Year, because I think it brings us back. I do have a whole class on cycles because it's such a big deal to me. Once I sort of started studying cycles and the agrarian calendar and the moon cycles and the sun cycles, and kind of even my own cycle when I did menstruate. Another word that's difficult for me, I apologize. When I started studying what work do we do at each part of our cycle, and there's a couple of really good books about this that could be helpful, and maybe I will put them in the show notes. Yoni Wisdom is one I can think of, and I can't remember the other one. It's been a while since I've read them because I don't have a cycle like that anymore. I do have cycles. They're just different now. So at any rate, where was I? Once I started really studying that, I wanted, it changed my life, because when I'm not trying to do summer work in the winter, what it feels like is being kind of Sisyphean, like I'm rolling a big boulder up the hill and I get almost there and it rolls back down. And it's because I'm working against, I'm working against gravity. I'm working against the wind. When I align with the cycles, it almost feels like the wind's at my back. This is the work we're supposed to be doing at this time. Our bodies are used to doing it, at this time of the year. And our bodies in terms of like our ancestral bodies, our karmic bodies, you know. So when we start aligning with the earth, and what we're aligning with is what's around us, our environment. And that makes it just that much easier to do the work, you know. It's like, you know, rolling the boulder down the hill instead of up the hill, you know. So let's talk about what is Ostara. Ostara is a modern pagan celebration of vernal equinox, and this is a moment where day and night are roughly equal in length. Equinox literally means equal night, and it's a threshold moment, a balance point. And you know, I don't know if you've heard the, you know, stories about being able to balance an egg, you know, on its end at equinox because the earth is balanced. Like that happens just this time of year. And so from here forward, the light grows. Now, historically, there isn't really strong evidence of a widespread ancient festival called Ostara before modern Wiccan codified it. The name comes from either the goddess Ostara or the goddess Eostre. It's spelled Eostre. And there's a couple ways to pronounce this, but Easter is the most common way I've read that it's pronounced. And Easter is a German goddess, and she's mentioned by the Venerable Bede, an early medieval historian, and he noted that there was a springtime festival that was named after Easter that would later become associated with the resurrection of Christ and called Easter. So we know that Easter may have been named after her, okay, not Ostara. So later folklore really connects Easter with hares and eggs. We don't have a lot of written history about this. Again, we have the Venerable Bede just mentioning it in passing that there was this festival called Easter for this German goddess, right? But you start seeing in the 19th century in like newspapers and things like that Easter, like, you know, they still do this in newspapers where they're like stories in the arts section. It's like, where does Easter come from? Or why do we associate hares and eggs with Easter? You know, and I don't mean hairs on your head, I mean rabbits. And that's because from these 19th century newspaper accounts, there's stories written that say, you know, Easter is comes from the German goddess named Eostre, basically spelled differently, and she transformed a bird into a hare, and the hare laid eggs for her festival. And there are many, many stories that are in different newspapers. Like, I just went down this rabbit hole, guys. Like, literally this whole, you know, a whole half an hour piece could be about all of the different accounts of where the rabbits and eggs come from for Easter. And so some of them say like, oh, Easter actually transformed this hare into a bird the bird into a hare because it wanted to live on Earth and it could still lay eggs, but it was sad that it couldn't fly anymore. You know, just all this crazy stuff. Is it ancient? Maybe not. We don't know. Like, we honestly don't know where those people got the stories that ended up in newspapers. But we do know that somebody wrote it, right? Are they ancient? Like I said, maybe not. Are they symbolically important? Maybe. Because across cultures, spring has always been associated with fertility and rebirth and renewal. And rabbits reproduce rapidly in the spring. There's lots of baby rabbits around. Eggs appear in abundance in the spring because finally it's warm enough to feed mama enough to be able to sit and brood on eggs, right? The land begins to wake up. We're starting to see things out in nature because we're also walking around more, right? So life kind of starts to return. There is a rebirth, right? All of the plants that looked at are now becoming green and having buds and flowers. And so, you know, this is where things get interesting because it's not just the pagan traditions that mark this moment. This season, this exact turning point is echoed across cultures and religions all over the world. So in Christianity, there's the season of Easter, which is the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which of course is a story of death and rebirth. And so we have this solemn 40 days of Lent, and then the celebration comes at the end, And it's interesting in the Christian church because it's very solemn. Like the crosses are hidden, they're covered. We don't sing as much. We aren't even allowed to say hallelujah most of the time in a church until Easter. So in Judaism, this is a time of Passover, which was commemorating liberation and renewal, a kind of rebirth in and of itself. In the Hindu tradition, Holi celebrates the arrival of spring with joy and color and the triumph of love and life over darkness. Ancient cultures from the Babylonians to the Mayans mark Vernal Equinox as a sacred time of balance and cosmic alignment. And we can even, look at the Teotihuacan, that pyramid. People travel all over the world in pilgrimages just to be there for spring equinox because the perfect alignment at dawn shows the snake climbing up the side of Teotihuacan. And we know that also there's stuff happening at Stonehenge with the Druids, like understanding this sacred time of balance and cosmic alignment. Exactly where the sun is creates a story and a symbolism and the same underlying truth, which is life returns, things start to move. And that's where I want to kind of bring it back, because it isn't just happening out there, that's happening in you. So Ostara is this threshold moment. You've moved through winter, the inward season, the fallow time, the shedding, the death, the quiet. Then we have Imbolc, where stuff starts to stir within us. We can't even see the buds yet, but below the surface, that seed that was planted, and it's not every seed, but there's some magic, mystery that happens within seeds where if they're planted in a way, if they're in the earth in an exact way, they're warm enough, they've gotten enough water, they start to warm up, they'll start to move, lightward, if that's a word. Something is stirring. It's not fully formed yet. It's not fully visible, but it's undeniable. And we really see this at Ostara. A lot of pagans think of, in the agrarian calendar, that Imbolc, that's February 1st, is the beginning of spring. So this is kind of mid-spring, right? There's a return of light, a return of energy, a return of possibility. And, we can feel that too within us. Like, I don't know if everybody feels that lightness. There's something about spring that just feels like the air is different, It's not as, sharp and crisp and, it's just, you hear the birds, everything starts to shift. So on the medicine wheel, this is the direction of east, the place of sunrise and of beginnings and of vision. And one of the allies we work with at Ostara is rabbit. And we see that, like all over the place. You go into any, CVS or Target, and it's just like rabbits galore. So yeah, rabbit is an obvious symbol of fertility. And we all kind of know why, because they reproduce quickly. And, if you live in North America, you may not understand that the March hare is something that happens in European, like this European breed of rabbit, which is a nocturnal creature. So the nocturnal creature, starts to mate, and it mates in the daytime. So people would not have seen rabbit all year. They see it in March when it starts to reproduce. And that specific, kind of hare is one that can get pregnant before the first litter is born. So they can be pregnant with a litter and also get pregnant with another litter. So then they have little babies, and then they can have another thing of babies, which is why it looks like they're always reproducing, blah, 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 over and over and over again. And also it connects with the lunar hare, okay, which is another interesting symbol in paganism, of like the rabbit at night, the creative being. So, rabbit medicine is not just about fertility and having sex and having lots of babies. Rabbit is also a prey animal, and it lives with heightened awareness, constantly sensing and listening and scanning for danger. And all of that happens at the same time. It still creates, reproduces, and moves forward. So rabbit doesn't wait for fear to disappear before it acts. It moves with fear. And to me, that's the real medicine. That's the courage, the bravery of prey animals. And a lot of people are very attracted to apex predators. I mean, if you talk to people, what do you want your animal that you work with, they're going to say bear, wolf, big cats like cougar or puma or black panther. The prey animals are really, really important to us as guides, especially if we're creative, healers, artists, sensitive humans, any kind of musician, poet, writer. We feel fear and vulnerability and exposure of being seen, and yet we're so drawn to do things out in the open, right? Art is to be seen. It's to be created by that person, and then we put it out there for others to be moved emotionally. But, when we are afraid, we often think that means we're not ready. And Rabbit basically says, you don't need to be fearless, you just need to be willing. And so Rabbit goes out and does what it does despite its fear. And so, Ostara becomes this real creative invitation to begin, to emerge, to create even before you feel ready. And that's really powerful and important. So this is a really powerful time for intention setting, for planting seeds, literally and metaphorically. And you may ask yourself, what part of me is ready to be reborn? What have I outgrown that I can release? What am I ready to call in? Where is my life, going, and where am I asked to find balance? Not perfect balance, but honest balance. And then again, you can work with that rabbit medicine, which is, vulnerability and fear, and ask what am I afraid to do that I basically just need to move into? So I have a cool ritual for you that you can do during this time, especially if you work. There's so many cool workings with eggs. So, in my kind of bruja work, I do limpias, which are egg cleansings. And that's a really interesting thing to learn about if you're ever interested. But this one is a little different. So you take a hard-boiled egg and a marker. Take it outside, somewhere you can connect with new growth. Maybe it's the edge of your garden, or a place, where you plant flowers for the spring, a budding tree, a patch of earth, anywhere. And we're just going to sit in the earth, breathe, let yourself kind of be let yourself arrive. We're going to reflect on some of those questions. What's ready to be reborn? What have I outgrown that I can now release? What am I ready to call in? Where am I ready to find balance? Where am I asked to find balance? What am I afraid to do that I need to move into? Where am I feeling vulnerable and creative? So, this is a time that you can journal all of these, reflect on those questions. Then you hold the egg in your hand, and this egg becomes a container and an incubator for your intention. You can draw a symbol that represents your intention. You can write a word, infuse it with energy, with prayer, with Reiki, if that's part of your practice. And then you can say, as the light increases, so does my intention. As I will it, so mote it be. Okay? Then bury the egg in the earth. Let it return. Let it nourish something new. And because that's really what this season is asking of us, to trust the unseen growth, to honor the small beginnings, and to say yes before we have proof. So, I ended up not going down a lot of rabbit holes. I have to say that my original research was 3 times longer than this. So if you ever want to hear that, just let me know. Send me a comment, send me an email. So, as you move through this threshold moment of equal light and equal dark, just remember that you're not separate from this turning. You are also turning, just as the earth is, and you're asking to trust what's quietly rising within you, to honor both the fear and the courage it takes to begin again. So may you plant something within yourself or in the soil that your future self will one day thank you for. So happy Ostara, little rabbits. Go make something beautiful. Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.